All right, welcome back to Strategic Management in a Post-Christian Era. We are looking at implementing strategies in this portion of the session. And in the Gospel according to Luke, it says, "After this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them on ahead of him 2 by 2 into every town and place where he himself was about to go." So we have this written vision and mission statement that we want to actually see implemented through your entire organization. We want everybody to be involved. So we can glean some amazing wisdom by looking at Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Gospels and the Holy Scriptures in the New Testament, as well as even into the book of Acts and some of the letters that are written by the apostles, to see how God chose to inaugurate his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven, and the methodology that he used, or the approaches that he used, in order to reach people where they were and to bring them, what do they say, to meet people on common ground and then lead them to higher ground. And so as we look at implementing strategies, there's a ton of biblical wisdom that we could utilize in order to give glory to God through the way that we conduct our business operations, and specifically in this session, how we actually go about implementing our strategies that we've chosen, utilizing the previous sessions and the information and the wisdom we gleaned in those sessions. So in this time, we're going to be talking about the nature of strategy implementation. We're going to look at annual objectives, policies, resource allocation, managing conflict, matching our structure with our strategy, restructuring, re-engineering, and e-engineering. We're going to look at linking performance and pay to strategies. We're going to look at managing resistance to change, managing the natural environment, creating a strategy supportive culture or structure, production and operation concerns when implementing the strategies, and finally we're going to close with a quick look at human resource concerns when implementing strategies. So right now, as we look back to our overview of the comprehensive strategic management model, we have developed a written vision. We have developed a written mission statement. We've looked at external factors and internal factors in order to identify strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We've looked at different strategies that are available to us. We have talked about actually taking that input and quantifying it and helping us to utilize some tools to choose the most attractive strategies, both quantitatively but also utilizing wisdom and intuition in order to select the strategies that are going to be most fruitful and hopefully in alignment with God's will. And now we're talking about actually implementing those strategies. So we're transitioning from the stage of identifying strategy to implementation. So we're going to be looking at now establishing policies, annual objectives that will help us get to our long-term goals, and what that looks like, things that we have to be concerned with as we take this vision and we actually get that to the people whose lives it's going to affect. So the nature of strategy implementation as opposed to strategy formulation is we're no longer identifying, positioning forces, but rather we're learning how to manage those forces. Before, we were concerned primarily with the effectiveness of the strategy that we chose. Now we're looking how to implement it efficiently. We were doing more intellectual exercise before. Now we're looking at actual operations. How does the rubber meet the road? In the first stage strategy formulation, it required a lot more intuitive skills, analytical skills. In the implementation, it's going to be special motivation. It's going to be leadership. We had targeted coordination amongst really strategists, and communication between strategists and the stakeholders. Now we're going to really need a broad-based coordination. We're going to really need to have solid communication, solid getting people on board and helping people understand how the part or the role that they play within the organization fits into the larger strategy. Then we have to consider management perspectives. You as strategists are now going to have to work with divisional and functional managers in order to overcome resistance to change and help them to really grapple with the changes that are going to be necessary in order for everyone to succeed with this particular strategy. Annual objectives. When we talk about long-term company objectives, this is just a sample of the Stamus Company's hierarchy of aims. And just to kind of run through it, the long-term company objective in this example is to double the company revenues in 2 years through market development and market penetration. The first division, the company has 3 divisions with different annual objectives. One of them is to increase divisional revenues by 40% this year and 40% next year. Their current revenues are at about $1 million. And so you have basically revenue-based objectives for those under the long-term company objective. Now, underneath that, within this, you have R&D annual objective, production annual objectives, marketing annual objectives. So you're going to not only have to disseminate these goals and work with your people to establish these goals, it'll always be better to allow your employees to consider what the overall goal is and what they need to do in order to be a contributor to reaching that goal. They want to be a part of something. It is much better to invite them into that story, invite them into part of that, realizing that vision, invite them into that mission, as opposed to just saying, boom, here, this is what you need to do. Will they do it? They'll try their best, I'm sure. They want to keep their job. But if you want them to be passionate, then get them involved. Get them involved in the vision. Get them involved in the mission. This continues on from what we've already done, working with our employees to establish these things. And now it's saying, okay, so we've all kind of agreed on this. What do we need to do to get there? This is what we're trying to do as an organization. Here's the facts all on the table. What do you think you can bring to the table in order to be able to contribute to us achieving these things in the time frame that we have set forth as an organization? And listen to their input and help them set their goals and help them to be help to motivate them by inviting them into that. So this is just an idea. This is just an example of how annual objectives are going to work based on the overall long-term objective of the company, or the policies. So once you kind of work with your employees to set these annual objectives, and it is a process. You're going to have to communicate well with your employees, well with your managers, your divisional leaders, so that you can so that everybody is going to be committed to making these goals. We talked about SMART goals, right? This is where that comes into play. Policies that you're going to have to utilize, these are instruments for your strategy implementation. Once you've identified your strategy, then it's a matter of saying, okay, here's some policies that are going to help us to achieve those strategies. And it's going to help us avoid those things that would cause us to fall prey to our weaknesses or external threats that we've discovered through the strategic management process and the information gathering process. It also reveals expectations. If you look at the policies that a company or an organization has, it reveals what's important to that company. It reveals what their expectations are as far as achieving those goals and what it means to be a part of that organization. Policies can pertain to the company as a whole. There can be policies that are specific to divisions or departments. So as you work with your people and with your leaders in order to establish policy, in order to realize these objectives, you want to be wise about it. And that means, again, increasing communication, And in that communication, making sure that the writing of policies is clear, it's concise, it's compelling, so that when they see the last thing that you want is your people looking at your policies and saying, I don't even know why that's there. What does that have to do with what we're trying to accomplish? Actually, that makes my job harder, and it makes it more difficult for me to be engaged in what they're calling us to be engaged in. So you want to be able to have an open communication amongst your people. So if you do have policies that were established maybe with previous strategies that can be reevaluated, you want to facilitate a culture where that communication is open, that you have those open door policies in order to discuss policy that's going to be effective. Resource allocation, strategic management versus political or personal factors. By choosing to implement the strategic management process, you are bringing a lot of objective management style into a situation that may have been very political and very personal in the way decisions are made. The beauty of strategic management is that the communication happens when it's done properly, and people know what they're getting into, and it actually reduces the amount of issues that you have, the amount of turnover that you have, because you don't have people just playing favorites and just randomly choosing to do this or do that. They're doing something with specific purpose, and that's important. So the resource allocation specifically plays into that. Not only financial resources that different departments need in order to accomplish their goals, but physical resources, human resources. Do they have the talent that they need? Do they have the training that they need? Technological resources. Do they have the bandwidth that they need in order to accomplish what you're asking them to do in the time that you're giving them? Managing conflict. As we're rolling these strategies out to the people, you're going to run into conflict. Conflict is a situation where you have two or more people with different viewpoints on a given situation who are doing this and aren't doing this. And so they're just not meshing. And so we need to understand that that's going to happen. Why is that going to happen? Well, let's say you have your human resources department who is charged with lowering expenses, and you have a sales department who needs more boots on the ground in order to get the product into the people's hands and to be able to be out there selling. Well, those are opposing objectives. So then you have to be able to get together and communicate and find creative solutions to those situations where both divisions can achieve their objectives. Ways to manage conflict: you can avoid the conflict, you can learn to diffuse conflicts, or you can confront conflicts. Obviously, avoiding a conflict over the long term is not going to be fruitful. Diffusing a situation can be wise, but temporary. Ultimately, you need to confront the difference, identify what's best for the organization and what's best for those involved, the stakeholders, and move forward wisely, having resolved the tension and resolved the issue. Managing structure and strategy. Structure dictates how objectives and policies are going to be established, how you structure your organization, where you have management, what levels of management you have, who reports to who. All of that matters because your objectives and your policies are going to be formulated based on that structure. Structure also dictates how resources are going to be allocated. Depending how you structure your organization, how you engineer your organization, it's going to impact how these human resources, how these financial resources are disseminated and sent to those areas needing them. Facilitate the strategic pursuit of the organization. By matching your structure with your strategy, you're going to help to facilitate bringing that strategy that you've chosen to implement to a place where the people who are involved can genuinely pursue the stated goal according to the strategy that you've chosen. It's through the structure that happens. And so we have to be wise in how we organize in order to empower the people to do their jobs, to do what we're calling them to do. So bringing the structure into alignment with the strategy is absolutely paramount. Different types of structure that you can choose from include functional structure, divisional structure, strategic business units, or matrix structure. Functional structure is basically saying we have an accounting department, we have a sales department, we have a production department, an R&D department. That's probably one of the most popular structures implemented in business in the United States. Divisional basically is you're going to be setting up specific divisions dealing with certain areas of product development or certain areas of your business. So those divisions, you may have a division, for instance, that produces a higher end vehicle versus a lower end vehicle. Maybe you have a company who produces Nissans, and then you have the other portion that produces Lexus. Strategic business units is when the organization gets so large that each business unit really needs to have its own functional organization. Matrix structure is a lot more complicated. It's being used more and more in American business now, and actually is the most biblical of the structures that we see, because there is a vertical relationship, but also a horizontal relationship. Hence the name matrix. So when we look at the kingdom of heaven, we know that we have one head, Jesus the Messiah, but then there's also the command to, within the church, to be subject to one another for the sake of the Messiah. So there's a vertical reporting structure and a horizontal reporting structure. So that's beginning to be realized in American business now. Matching structure and strategy. This is a chart that was constructed by a gentleman by the name of Chandler. But again, if we take a look at biblical wisdom, we see a lot of this happening there. A new strategy is formed. New administration problems emerge. Organizational performance declines. New organizational structure is established, and organizational performance improves. So again, looking at biblical wisdom, we see the kingdom of heaven being launched. We see a lot of resistance from existing regimes. We see the gospel going forth with power and impacting new cultures as well as the existing Jewish culture. And all of a sudden, the church begins to be formed as an organization or an organism. And over time, the implementation of the will of God on earth as it is in heaven improves. Restructuring, re-engineering, and e-engineering. When we talk about implementing these strategies and we look at what is existing and what is in place, it may require restructuring, which includes downsizing, it includes right-sizing or delayering the organization. If you have an organization that's rather large and over time has basically come up with a lot of different layers of management that's no longer necessary based on the new strategy, then you can delayer that and hopefully find new positions for people and retool and retrain your existing workforce. Re-engineering would be to basically deal with, the primary focus there is dealing with the bureaucracy, looking at existing processes, work processes, and saying, you know what, the way we're going to be doing business now, none of that makes sense, so we're going to scrap all that and we're going to get rid of the bureaucracy and we're going to have, you know, a flatter reporting structure. E-engineering is dealing with the technological touch points, how you communicate and engineer the function and flow of work within the business and the function and flow of communications with all of your stakeholders, really. So the implementation of the strategy, well, you'll have to consider that and how to work with your technology to engineer something that's going to be in alignment with the new strategy. Linking performance to pay strategies. Developing a pay system that is engaging with your employees is so important because money is a huge motivator for most people. And so as you develop pay plans and decide how you're going to incentivize your employees to continue giving their best to your organization, monetary incentive is certainly one of your primary tools. So the questions that you'll need to ask is, does the plan capture their attention? When they hear about this pay plan, the way that you're going to pay them, is it something that they get excited about? And 6 months after implementing it, is it still something that they're talking about? When they talk to their friends at cocktail parties and over coffee, are they singing your praises because they have a pay system that actually rewards the value that they bring to the organization? Do they understand the plan? Having a bonus plan or an incentive plan that is extremely complicated, where they really don't know how what they do on a daily basis results in a greater reward for them, then that becomes a problem. For instance, biblically speaking, it says that God is a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. So what does God want? God wants a personal relationship with us, and so He promises rewards to those who diligently seek Him, who diligently look for that relationship, look to engage with Him in relationship. So when we talk about realizing a vision and fulfilling a mission, how do we tie that directly to the pay plan, or how do we tie the objectives, the long-term objectives and short-term objectives, annual objectives, to their pay? Doing that wisely can pay many benefits to you as the organizational leader, and to your employees, and to your customers. A motivated workforce is a good workforce. Is the plan improving communication? Does the pay plan allow you to communicate your expectations? Does the pay plan allow the employees to communicate where they are with regard to their goals on a regular basis so that they can get the help that they need from the organization to be empowered to achieve the goals that they have? Does the plan pay out when it should? Does it actually reward the activities and the performance that it's supposed to reward when it's supposed to do that? And does it withhold that bonus when the performance is not met? Is the company or unit performing better? When we look at the whole unit or the whole division of the business, and we look at the pay plan that was implemented, did it actually increase the performance of the organization based on the metrics that you have set in place? These are all things that you're going to have to consider as you put into place the proper pay strategies. Managing resistance to change. Resistance to change is the single greatest threat to your strategy implementation. And I cannot express enough how important it is to continue to communicate clearly, concisely, and in a way that is compelling with your people, listening as well as speaking into the situation so that you can move forward together. There are 3 different approaches to change. You can force change, that's one strategy, very top-down approach, but it very rarely is effective in engaging motivating long-term relationships with your employees. An educative strategy and an educative strategy, change strategy, is it's going to take a little bit more time. You're going to have to help them to be trained on this new strategy. You're going to have to help them to understand things. And so you can take that approach. And then finally, you have the rational or self-interest change strategy. You can help them to understand why it's good for the organization, why it's good for the community, and why it's good for them as individuals. The difficulty with that last strategy is that when you implement a new strategy, it's not always in the best interest of everybody. And so you have to do what you can to make those hard decisions. But if you choose to roll the strategy out in this way, to appeal to their rational thinking and to their self-interest, then you really have to genuinely be in a position where you're looking to do the absolute best you can as strategists, as employers, entrepreneurs, for the people that you have been entrusted with by God. And a lot of times, changes that are difficult to make, you're still going to run into some resistance. And so how you manage that resistance is going to come down to how you communicate, how the strategy that you choose to communicate, and how you maintain and build those relationships with the people whose lives the strategy change is going to impact. Managing the natural environment. Conducting operations that mend rather than harm. Focusing on managing the way you do business in a way that looks at a situation or looks at a scenario and wants to bring a healing or a wholeness to it as opposed to a harm. That means you need to keep in mind preservation and conservation. It means you need to consider the types of pollutants that your organization creates and how to control those things. And if you don't choose to do them, if you don't choose to do the right thing, there is the Environmental Protection Agency, like we said earlier. There is the law is there for the lawless. But we as people looking to glorify God in all that we do means stewarding creation well. And that means adjusting our perspectives maybe that we've had in the past, where we have been more focused on temporal things than longer term things. Creating a strategy supportive structure. So when you have a structure of your organization that is going to be conducive with implementing strategy, here's 10 tips that will help you with that. 1, formal statements of your organization's philosophy, charters, creeds, materials, things that you use to hire new people, things that you use to bring people together. Having those things formally stated so that it's clear to everybody is one step in making sure that you have a strategy supportive culture. Designing of your physical spaces and facades and buildings. If you look at, like, for instance, companies like Google or companies like Microsoft or any of these organizations who are really appealing to some of the Apple computers, some of these organizations who are appealing to the most talented people that we have, they are considering the workspace that they're in and making sure that it reflects the culture that they want to have, a culture that embraces change, a culture that embraces strategy, that is going to be conducive to achieving the vision and mission. So it should be the environment, the physical environment should be supportive of that. Deliberate role modeling, teaching, and coaching by leaders. This is an ongoing thing that your leaders in your organization are mentors, that they know how to come alongside the people who are entrusted to them and to speak into their lives and to build them up and to equip them. Absolutely important. Explicit reward and status system, promotion criteria. People should be aware of what they need to do in order to grow with your organization. It shouldn't be a mystery. It shouldn't be based on politics. It should be something that is set forth so people have a clear as clear as possible of a career path when they enter your organization. Stories, legends, myths, parables about key people and events. As you do business, you're going to have success stories. People are going to do amazing things with your organization if you have an organization that is actually going to be, around for a period of time. And I hope that you're all in business with a desire to be a long-term business here in Statesville and maybe even beyond. And so as you see those success stories, as you have employees do really well in situations, to be able to tell those stories, it should happen more than just at that annual meeting, or it should be things that are talked about, because not only does it motivate the person who did a great job, but it also creates really an image of what you're looking to accomplish. So we as leaders and managers, we should be excited about having our eyes focused on when people do well, and to really find the gold that's there, and to give it its place of value within our organization. So stories and these things about key people and events within the organization. What leaders pay attention to, measure, and control. People want to know how they are being judged. They want to know that they can come in and that they can do their job and do their job well, and know that the management and the leadership who is looking at them not to criticize them, not to beat them down, but to build them up, to equip them, to help them do what we're doing for the whole organization, to help them identify their strengths, their weaknesses, their opportunities, their threats, and to help them to do well in their position, and to help them develop skills that are going to help them over the long term. Leaders' reactions to critical incidents and organizational crises. If you have a leader who doesn't handle crises well, who isn't trained for that sort of thing, then we need to get them new training. We need to equip them for that, because the people who are watching, they're thinking to themselves, okay, I want to grow in this organization, but if that's what leadership looks like presently, I think that I can do a better job, but if I have the same training as that person, then I'm probably not going to be able to. And so they're going to start wrestling with these things, and the stories that are going to emerge in your culture are about how they have a terrible boss. And that's not what you want happening in your organization. Organizational decisions and procedures. What does it mean to, with the organizational decisions and procedures, how does that happen? What does that look like? Helping your people to understand how decisions are made within the organization, and how procedures are arrived at, and how they are actually worked out on a practical level. Very, very important. Criteria used for recruitment, selection, promotion, leveling off, retirement, and excommunication of people. Communicating all of these things to the organization, to your people, to your teams, is very important, because it helps them to understand what your expectations are, or actually I should say what the expectations of the whole organization are. Because if you have everyone looking to build one another up, then you have really the foundation for a solid organization. Production operations concerns when implementing strategies. Production-related decisions. We have to think about how we actually produce our products, and how this new strategy that we're implementing is going to impact the way that we produce our products, the way that we bring our products to our customers. Every aspect of our production and our operations is going to have to be considered, and how the strategy that we've decided to go with is going to affect that. We're going to have to look at the production costs that we've had in the past and identify what the costs are going forward, hopefully realizing some efficiencies in order to be able to bring a better product at a lower price. Production flexibility. Are you able to switch gears when necessary, specifically during times of transition with strategy? And then cross-training. What we found is that when you cross-train your employees, when they know how to do different jobs within the organization, then transition and change becomes a lot easier, because they are people who are used to having or being a part of a learning environment, so that if a strategy is coming that's going to change the direction of the firm in order to be more in alignment with the vision that you have as an organization, people who know that you're willing to invest in them, to retool them and re-equip them for another position within the organization, and they're used to that, are going to be much more willing to change than people who are used to doing the same job in and out every day, so that if something changes, they're not equipped to completely learn a new skill that quickly. But if they're used to changing and doing different tasks, then they're going to be able to discover that these strategies and these changes are intended for the betterment of them as individuals. So it would behoove them to engage with the new strategy in a positive way. So cross-training your employees is absolutely a great approach to creating a culture that is able to implement new, fresh strategies that are going to help your organization. Human resource concerns when implementing strategies. Human resources is going to have to deal with a lot of stuff when it comes to implementing new strategies. Your human resources department, they have to assess the staffing needs. They have to look at the costs that are going to be involved in adding new positions or delayering the company. There can be tremendous cost savings, but there also can be additional costs, maybe a reallocation of costs in order to implement the strategy and to hire on the people to fill new positions and new divisions or new business units. Developing performance incentives is something that your human resources department, you're going to have to engage with them, communicate well with them as strategists to help them to understand what you're trying to accomplish on the long term, middle term, and short term, so that they know how to incentivize the people that are working for your organization, because they are focused on human relationships. Ultimately they're engaging with the people more than any other division within your organization. That's what they're there for. They're there to help your people to develop. They're there to bring your people on board and to see them through their entire time as employees with your organization. So how you as strategists communicate with your human resources department in order to make known to them clearly what's expected of them, and to help them to bring to the employees and to the stakeholders that which is needful, because they're concerned not only with, if you think about it, human resources, they're not only concerned with your employees, they're concerned with your employees' families, and etc. So ESOP plans, 401k plans, how you're looking out for your people over the long term, helping your people with a balanced work and home life and what that looks like, and developing a culture that sees the importance of your people having rest, of your people having time with family, because you want the families of your employees to be advocates. When they're at their jobs or they're out and about town doing their thing, you want them to be really cheerleaders for their spouses or for their mom or dad, that they work for the greatest company, and everything's going really well and we're well taken care of, and mom or dad is always so happy when they come home from work and they tell us these great things that go on at work. Everybody has bad days, but ultimately we want all of your stakeholders to be cheerleaders for your organization. Corporate fitness programs. With the cost of healthcare these days, it's crazy. Doing what you can and providing incentives for your employees to stay healthy and for their families to stay healthy These are all things that your human resources department is going to work with you and with your people in order to implement your strategy. And the more valuable your employees perceive the benefits package that you have for them, the more committed they are going to be to helping you to realize the vision and to fulfill the mission of your organization. So that brings us to the conclusion of tonight's session. The three scriptures that we considered tonight was, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Is that something that you're modeling for your people? I had an employee one time, a young Catholic man who worked for me, and he loved the restaurant business. And he and I were actually he had gotten licensed. He was an intern, and he had gotten licensed as a stockbroker, and he was making really good money. And we were actually headed down to do a seminar. I think it was in Fort Lauderdale, and he stopped by my house because we were carpooling. And he walked in my house, and he saw that particular verse, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord," on a magnet on my refrigerator. And he looks at me and he says, "I knew it. I knew you were a Christian." And to me, that helped my heart a lot. He saw how I conducted my affairs at business, how I did business with customers, how I interacted with my bosses and supervisors, and he knew that Jesus was important to me. He knew that I lived my life in a way where I was trying to honor God in what I did. And that was an amazing thing. It was a humbling thing too, because a lot of times God's grace works in our lives in ways that we don't even understand. But that was one of those things that was very impactful for me. And I would pose that question to you: is your organization the kind of organization where people can look at your business and the way that you impact the community and say, "I bet you most of the people that work there are Christians. I'm sure that the owner there is a Christian." And maybe they'll ask. And you can say, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Another scripture we looked at says, "For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you a hope and a future." Do you receive that word from God? And if so, are you allowing that word to reflect through you to your people, that they know that the plans that you have for them as leaders and as strategists, as managers, as entrepreneurs, that you have good intentions for your employees, that your desire for them is that they should prosper, not just financially, but that they should grow as human beings, and that you are for them. And finally, we looked at the scripture that says, "After this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them on ahead of him, 2 by 2, into every town and place where he himself was about to go." I hope that you're here because you are a business owner, entrepreneur, leader, or manager who wants to make a positive impact and bring glory to God through your business activities. If that's the case, then developing a vision and a mission that's going to allow you to grow your business, both here locally and hopefully even beyond, because businesses that are glorifying God and businesses who are taking forth the wisdom of God and positively impacting communities, the environment, individual lives, those are the types of organization that this nation needs. This is where God has planted us. And so our prayer is for the peace of this nation. And that happens not just in our prayer lives, but by us allowing God's wisdom to inform the way that we do business and the way that we take forward his purposes through our individual vocations. So again, I thank you for joining me here this evening. I pray that you have a good week, and I'll see you next week for session 6.